Hey, everybody, it's Michael Shermer. It's time for another episode of The Michael Shermer Show, brought to you as usual by Skeptic Society and Skeptic Magazine. Hey, look at this recent issue here on artificial intelligence. Guess what we're discussing today on the show? Not our first issue. Here's two more in the back catalog. And here's one from the 90s, artificial intelligence, when we used to joke, we're 5 years away and always will be when AI finally gets here. It looks like it's here, or something like that is here. And that brings me to my guest today. Taming Silicon Valley is the new book by Gary Marcus, How We Can Ensure That AI Works for All of Us. Okay, let me give him a proper introduction here. Gary Marcus is a distinguished cognitive scientist, author, and entrepreneur noted for his pioneering research on the development of human cognition, as well as his critiques of deep learning and artificial intelligence. He's written multiple influential books on these topics, emphasizing the need for a more hybrid and integrative approach to building intelligent systems. Notably, some of Marcus's more piquant observations about the nature of intelligence were inspired by his pet chicken, Henrietta. Her behaviors and quirks served as a whimsical yet insightful lens through which he contemplated the complexities and nuances of biological intelligence in comparison with artificial constructs. Gary, I think you're the first guest I've ever had that has a pet chicken. Tell us about your chicken and what am I reading there?
My pet chicken is fictional. That's what I will tell you about my pet chicken. But ChatGPT, I think it was, really did write that biography. And that illustrates, I think, one of the biggest challenges with large language models, which is they do what we call hallucinations. Hallucination is a bit charitable, makes it sound human-like in a way that it isn't really. It's really just a kind of statistical aggregation of a lot of information that doesn't really go together. It shows the limits of these systems. So any system could fact check and say, does Gary, or any good system would fact check and say, does Gary own a pet chicken? Are there any sources that support that? And large language models don't know how to do that. So they just made it up. Later, I discovered after the first time someone sent that to me, that there is a author, a children's illustrator, who did a book called something like Henrietta Goes to the Market or something like that, by someone named Gary Oswald. I'm Gary Marcus. And so the statistics of the proximity of the word Gary and chicken and Henrietta somehow led to this insane biography of me. I mean, I hope the first part is true and that I really am a distinguished cognitive scientist, the gray hair giving it away or something like that. But, some of it's made up. And that's pretty typical of what we have seen from large language models.
Yeah. Just to be fair to you, you are also the author of 5 books, including The Algebraic Mind, Cluj, which I read back in the day, The Birth of the Mind, and the New York Times bestseller Guitar Zero. You've been speaking at places like Davos and TED on these, and you just appeared recently in front of the U.S. Senate. So there's your proper introduction. And Taming Silicon Valley is the new book. Okay,
and all people will remember is the pet chicken.
The chicken.
Don't remember anything else.
Okay, Gary, maybe you could just give us a 2-3 minute just an explainer on what is AI, AGI, generative AI, ChatGPT. What are these things? Just so we're talking about the same thing.
So it's a good question, actually, to try to orient all of that. I would say that AI is a research field and also an engineering idea. And they're both basically about human behavior, getting machines to be intelligent like those machines. Maybe not exactly the same way. So, for example, most of us would count a chess computer as a form of AI, a chess program, even if it doesn't play chess like a person. But it does an intelligent thing that people do. And you can get into an argument. You can say, is it AI if it does some of the things that people do and not all of them? I would say if you want to call a chess computer intelligent, that's a matter of definition. It's okay with me if you want to define things that way. Sometimes we talk about artificial general intelligence. And that's the idea that you'd have one AI system that can essentially solve all reasonable problems that you might send to it in the way that you'd expect a reasonably intelligent person could solve a wide variety of problems, especially if they have the right training. And of course, these machines are trained on the entire internet, so you have reasonable expectations. The reality is that what we have right now is general, but it's always making, or often I should say, making these silly mistakes like we just saw, and all kinds of other silly mistakes, and maybe we can get into that later. But artificial general intelligence would mean you don't just play chess or fold proteins. You can solve essentially any problem. You can be adaptive and so forth. Excuse me. Generative AI is the thing that's popular right now. ChatGPT is the best known example of it. And that's a particular technique for trying to approach AI using massive amounts of data and statistical engines that are basically doing a version of autocomplete on steroids, where you predict the next word and they can do it in a very complex context. They have these context buffers that can now be 1 million words long. And you try to do whatever appears to be intelligent simply by predicting, hey, what did people say in circumstances that are sort of like this? And it turns out you get something that's sort of approximately correct a bunch of the time without doing too much work, and you can almost never actually count on it. So it's like the old saying, a jack of all trades, master of none. Large language models are in some way like that. And I like to think of them as large bullshit machines because they can bullshit on any topic, but it doesn't mean that we should ever count on anything it says.
Yeah, I like this quote from you here from the book. Generative AI systems have proven themselves again and again to be indifferent to the difference between truth and bullshit. I like that. You know, that has a technical meaning now in cognitive science, as you know, that it's not caring about the truth. It's just saying whatever. The liar at least knows what the truth is. The bullshitter doesn't even know or care what the truth is.
That's right. And I get all the time, oh, well, people say things that aren't true too, but they say them for different reasons. So people, for example, will lie in order to, get a job or because they want to sleep with someone. So they might want to fool someone. And of course, people make mistakes too. They forget things and so forth. But the reason that large language models do it is because they don't know the facts. They're not doing it to impress you or whatever. They're just predicting the next word. And it's a function of how those statistics work that they sometimes come up with things that aren't true. And something that's really hard for people who are not in the AI field to get, or for many people, is that these systems, although they give a kind of illusion of intelligence, don't really do the things that people do. So I know you've thought a lot about like psychics and things like that. I mean, large language models are kind of like a psychic thing where they fool the people that, want to believe. And people have a hard time accepting that they're not actually like humans. So they don't fact check, for example, what they say. So in my TED talk, I think you mentioned, one of the examples I gave is one of these systems said Elon Musk died in a car crash. Well, that's absurd. Any human would realize, in 2018, any human would realize he's still alive, right? I mean, posts on Twitter or X or whatever you call it every day. He's in the news every day. Like, obviously the man's still alive. An intelligent person would check their facts relative to known facts. And if they wanted to be careful, they might even go to sources and so forth. But any intelligent person will say, well, obviously, he's still alive and there must be something wrong here. And the large language models don't have that intuition and don't have that mechanism. They don't do sanity checking to see whether what they say is right. It's just contextually, some people died in car crashes. He owns Tesla, the company, rather than a Tesla as a car. And the systems don't make that distinction. It's all just word statistics. That's all that's there. They don't do the sanity checking that a person would do. But there's a powerful illusion for those who want to believe that there's more intelligence there than there really is.
Yeah. So when the Google AI generated African American, Native American, and female founding fathers of the United States, famously, is that just a silly hallucination, or is the conservatives on the far right anyway accused Google of being, progressive, left, woke, and they corrupted their AI? Why did it do that?
It was actually both to some degree. So part of it was exactly the lack of sanity checking that I'm talking about. So there was a prompt rewriting thing that took in a prompt, as far as I understand it, took in a prompt and tried to kind of make it, let's not say woke, but have a certain, bias in that direction. It wasn't trying to be literally woke, I don't think. But and there was a reason for that, which is a history of systems going the other direction, and they still often go the other direction. And nobody gets up in arms. Like I've shown a bunch of examples on my Twitter space, like you say, make an ethnically diverse rock band. And it basically, even now after that Google thing, you'll get 6 white guys with different lengths hair. Like that's not ethnically diverse, right? And so there's a known problem. It's been known for a decade that these systems have racial biases and sexism biases and so forth. And Google kind of overcorrected for that. That was the first step. And they really did. And they deserve some heat for that, though. In fairness, everybody else deserves heat for the opposite direction. But anyway, you put that aside, but none of those systems actually fact check. So they don't know, what a founding father looks like. And even though there's a lot of data on there in the internet to look it up, you still get the problem. Here's an opposite direction that happened afterwards. Is I typed into Grok, the latest Elon Musk concoction. I said, show me the prime minister of Italy. And it gave me 4 pictures. They were all male. The actual prime minister is female. And 2 of them were Donald Trump. Like, I mean, like, how bad can your fact checking be? But there is no fact checking, in fact. And Trump is overrepresented as politician. And the system doesn't really know the difference between one politician and the next. So it spits out Trump.
Right. Huh. Interesting. All right. So, like in my classes, I give lectures on cognitive biases and signal detection theory and rationality and logic, if P then Q and so on. And then I give examples. And then in the test, I give them other examples and they have to pick out, well, what's the example of the confirmation bias, hindsight bias, or whatever. That would be kind of a general intelligence. I'm giving them a principle, then they have to apply it with new examples. Is AI able to do that, something like that yet?
It's very hit or miss. So something that I think confuses many people, even professionals in the field, is what you're really talking about is generalization. And neural networks, and ChatGPT is a form of a neural network, have for 30 years, well, really even longer, but I started writing about this 30 years ago, have been able to do some generalization, but not other forms of generalization. And people want to look at it with a very broad brush. They want to say, I can show you that my neural network generalizes, so we're done here. We have solved intelligence. And I've been hearing that argument literally for 30 years. I mean, you know my mentor very well, Steve Pinker. I know you guys have ridden around in tandem bicycles and so forth. So back in the day, I worked with Pinker on my PhD when he was still at MIT. And we were looking at how children learned irregular verbs. He's probably told you some about this stuff. So, kids sometimes will say braked instead of broke and things like that. And that's what my dissertation was about. And we found that the neural networks of that day sometimes generalized, but didn't always generalize in the right ways and so forth. And a little bit after I worked for Pinker, I did these experiments on a kind of neural network that was popular in the late 90s that are really predecessors to the current systems. And I showed that they could generalize a little bit. So I took a very easy mathematical function, the easiest one, in fact, f of x equals x. Your input is the same as the output. And I trained these neural networks on a bunch of even numbers. And what I showed is they were represented as strings of binary digits. And what I showed is they could generalize to some new even numbers, but they couldn't generalize to any odd numbers. And nowadays we would call that the problem of distribution shift. And it's still the thing that really, I think, more than anything else, cripples these systems is they can't deal with that. So they can generalize a little bit, like to the other even numbers in this case from many years ago, but not far enough away, say, to the other odd numbers. And we have seen this time and time again. I would say that $200 billion have been wasted. I'm not kidding. 200 billion with a B by people who don't appreciate this point. The first 100 billion was on driverless cars, which only sort of work right now, but still don't generalize enough. So they generalize a little, but they don't generalize far enough. They don't go far enough beyond the distribution. So outliers or edge cases cripple the driverless cars and have still limited how much they've been rolled out in the real world. Pun not intended, but not bad. And they're also crippling large language models. So like everybody in the world saw the hype last year. 2023 was the year of ChatGPT, and 2024 has been the year of AI disillusionment, where a lot of people have come to realize that, hey, in my business case or whatever, it sort of works and sort of doesn't. I can't count on it. Well, that's all actually a problem of distribution shift. You've got some training data and your system works some of the time and it fails others. A person who has kind of followed in the tradition that I kind of helped start back in the days with Pinker is a guy named Colin Fraser. And I won't maybe say what he does in his day job because I don't know if that's public, but for fun, as a hobby, he likes to break large language models, like to show that they fail. And he's come up with some great cases. Here's one that he actually inspired. I won't get exactly the right words, but he took these classic things. We call them river crossing problems. I'm sure you've seen some of them. They're like, there's a goat and there's a man and a woman, and you go across and you have to get across in a boat or whatever. So usually they involve 7 steps. You have to take the goat across, leave it there, but you can't leave it with the cabbage because the goat will eat the cabbage. So you go back and I'm sure you've seen problems like this in and your audience has too. So Colin made a very simple one. A man and a woman have a boat and they need to get across the river. What do you do? And so GPT comes up with this crazy cockamamie scheme of like the man carries the boat across, finds another way to get back. He swims back. Somehow the boat magically reappears, and finally he takes the woman across or something like that. When really he could just take the woman in the boat across the first time. And this is a failure of generalization. Like the system knows just enough to be dangerous. Like it knows kind of, by looking at similar words of similar problems what to do. But then it completely botches it. This just happens over and over again. And what's even worse is you never know. Nobody knows, not just me, not just you, but nobody knows for any given problem on any occasion, is it going to get it right? I mean, imagine if you had a calculator and it was like, roulette, whether the calculator gave you the right answer on any given time. Like you would never use the calculator. If you had a calculator that was like 70% correct, you'd be like, fuck it, I'm just not going to
Yeah.
I'm going to go back to my dad's slide rule. Like this is just not working for me. But we have this like cult almost right now where people are taking these things that are like 70% calculators. Sometimes they get it right. Sometimes they get it wrong. We never can predict which is which. And people are all excited about it. But then what they find when they actually use it in their business problems or whatever is, it's limited. So there are some cases where people, I think, get real value, like brainstorming. If you want to, come up with 10 advertising slogans and maybe and use it to do that, maybe 3 of them will work and that's fine. You've got a human in the loop that's doing the filtering. Or, some people like prepare interviews that way now. Like, what are 10 things I can ask Gary Marcus? It's probably not going to come up with as clever an introduction as you did, right? Right, you came up with a clever introduction. You actually read the book and you saw this funny bit about Henrietta, and it's probably not going to do that kind of thing. But some of it will be useful. So brainstorming is okay, but a lot of the other applications that people would like to use it, like for medicine or something like that, the cost of error can be pretty high. And because we don't have good ways of guaranteeing that the things work, it's problematic. You compare that to like building a device driver on Windows. We know how to prove that that's correct, or how to do certain parts of the software in an airplane. We now have formal verification techniques. Nobody can verify anything with a large language model, and that's a real limit to, I think, the value that they can add to society.
Yeah, interesting. This is a motivation question, I guess. I like writing books. I like reading my guest books and preparing notes. It's what, kind of stimulates me. I could do what you just suggested, I guess, but I don't know. I could pay somebody to, I don't know, ride my bike for me or something. It's just what I do.
People ask me all the time, did you, because I wrote my new book, Taming Silicon Valley, really fast. And people are like, did you use ChatGPT? And I say there are 2 things I don't do that some other people might. I don't, use ChatGPT to write my books. It's the same. Like, I want that experience. I enjoy doing that. I don't really trust the outputs. And then I don't pay for sex. Like some people might. I don't, but I'm not doing that. That's just not for me.
Well, speaking of which, here, not sex, but using it for things. Here's from yesterday's Wall Street Journal. Just below the fold, colleges come to terms with the use of AI as the fall semester is opening up. Cornell is and Columbia University is letting professors decide the extent to which tools like OpenAI and ChatGPT are allowed in its coursework. Others are forbidding it. One professor came up with an idea. You have to use it and then write what the problem is and the differences between what it generated and what you can generate rather than just using it.
That's actually my idea.
That's your idea?
I've been pushing that for a couple of years. I guess some other people are too.
Nice.
Yeah, but that's always been my suggestion, is I don't think we can actually interdict it. And I think it's actually good that the students learn something about the limits of it. An important thing to remember, and we should have maybe made this clear earlier, is ChatGPT is just the AI that we have right now. In 10 years, we'll have an AI maybe on very different principles, might have a different architecture, and maybe different companies will build it, but we'll eventually get to a better AI. But it is important that today's college students understand the AI we have now and get some experience for learning about the limits of a technology and the strengths and how to use it. And so, I think it's fine that students use it if we do it in that way. There was a tweet actually about it, because I've been suggesting this for a while. There was an amazing tweet. Somebody said, I used the Marcus method, which is basically what we just described. And I think the guy had 63 students. And here was why the tweet went viral. Like 8 million people saw his tweet. He said, I used the Marcus method, explain what it was, having the students write about it, see, what was a hallucination, etc. And I had 63 students, And every one of the 63 students found hallucinations in the output of the system. That was kind of mind-boggling, and that's why the
Wow.
thing went kind of wild. And that hasn't got that much better. You have people in the industry keep promising, oh, the solution to hallucinations is a few months away, blah, 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 blah. It's not really. It's intrinsic to the nature of this technology. We will build other technologies. This might even be part of those other technologies. But there's some basic advance we haven't had yet. And we're kind of, I think, barking up the wrong tree, looking for just more data to solve it. So something else we haven't talked about today is this idea of hyperscaling. We will just add more data and more of Jensen Huang's NVIDIA chips. And once we just have more chips and more data, everything's going to be solved. And for a little while, that actually worked. Didn't solve everything, but made things better. So GPT-2 was just bigger with more data than GPT-1. Although we just called it GPT. And GPT-3 was just bigger and more data than GPT-2, and there were big improvements each time. And in fact, GPT-4 was just bigger than GPT-3, and it was a lot better. But we seem to have finally hit a phase of diminishing returns. So GPT-4 was trained 2 years ago, as of when we're recording this, and nobody's really done a lot better since. There are different theories about this, but if you look at the benchmark data and so forth, there have been some modest improvements, but we've moved more to an incremental improvement as opposed to an exponential regime. So people kept saying, oh, look at these exponential improvements. 3 is so much better than 2 is so much better than 1. But like GPT Turbo or 4.0 or whatever the latest one is, they're just not that much better. And they're still having the same problems of hallucinations, unreliability, and so forth. So there was this trick, we'll just make them bigger. They worked for a while, but it has stopped giving the same return. So eventually we will do something else. Like, I think the field is insane right now. Like the definition, the old line, the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and hoping that it works after seeing it break the first time. Well, that's what's happening right now is right. We have now like 7 companies building gigantic models, all hoping that they will be so much better than GPT-4. And they're all kind of coming out more or less the same. They're training them on the same data and they have the same profile of errors. Like from a cognitive psychology perspective, you look at an organism and you look not only at what it gets wrong, but the errors that it makes. And that's really what I learned over Pinker's shoulder. And it's just the same errors for all these systems, give or take. It's the same psychology. And that's not the psychology of the creature that you want to put in charge of the world, right? You don't want an AI creature that you can't count on, that's unreliable, that gives you like an approximation to intelligence, but in this really kind of, herky-jerky bullshit sort of way. Like, you don't want a bullshitter running your society. But that's kind of what people are doing. They're like, where can I put, ChatGPT into next? And I'm like, you want a bullshitter to run your, nuclear weapons? Like, that's crazy.
Well, part of human intelligence is the generalizability of solving problems you've never seen before based on, your instincts and pattern connections and so on. So on the generalization question, is there a difference between the chess program and, say, Watson that beat Ken Jennings in Jeopardy? That feels more generalizable, but is it?
Yeah, there's actually a secret trick to Watson. I will, by the way, plug something because it's so cool. I did an 8-part podcast myself. It was only a limited run. It was very well produced. The first 2 episodes were about the rise of IBM Watson and the fall of it. So, which I think are kind of a parable for where we are now. So Watson came out, people were stunned that it won at Jeopardy. I mean, even I was surprised by that. It actually got me back into the field of AI because I was surprised by it. And then, they promised that it would solve cancer and everything else, and it didn't really deliver on that. And so over a space of about 6 or 7 years, people eventually realized that IBM had overpromised. And we may see a parallel here, right? OpenAI is kind of, promising everything, and we'll see how much of that is delivered. But to your specific point, Watson appeared to be general, but there was a trick, and I don't think it was a deliberate trick. It turns out that Jeopardy basically consists of finding the Wikipedia page that's most appropriate to the clue. So 99 or something like that % of the answers are titles of Wikipedia pages. And so it didn't have to sort of do arbitrary open-ended inference. Like, I don't know, if you're an investment banker looking, or I mean, a stock trader looking at the incoming news, you can't just say, well, which Wikipedia page is going to prepare me for this? Watson, although it looked very general, really just had to, it was really information retrieval. It was find the title of a Wikipedia page that is closest to the clue. And so it wasn't as general. The people who built it knew that. The people, Dave Ferrucci was an amazing manager of people, and he had a very specific goal: win in Jeopardy. He was under no illusions that it was like artificial general intelligence. And it's fascinating to listen to him talk in this podcast that we did together. But then the company, people higher up in the company tried to sell it as if it was artificial general intelligence. It was brilliant for what it was, but in some ways it was like a chess computer. It was really built to do one thing. It wasn't really built to, for example, do medical diagnosis. And it was like putting a square peg in a round hole to try to make it do that.
Interesting. Yeah. On the self-driving issue, is it that Tesla hasn't built in enough, I guess, outlying things that could happen on the road and you just need more of that? Or does it need some other cognitive step of intelligence of, if X comes up that you've never seen, here's what you should do, hit the brakes or whatever it would be?
So my theory is that you need, let me back up 1 second. Nobody knows the answer to your question. Let me be clear about that. But I have been forecasting since 2016 that current approaches were not going to be adequate. That we weren't, or at least it was going to be much harder than people thought. And I think, roughly speaking, my prediction has been correct. It has been much harder than people anticipated. There are a lot of predictions that, we would have it by 2020 or whatever that are now in the rearview mirror. Another accidental pun. Sorry, folks. What we don't really know is, can this be done or not? And does it require artificial general intelligence or not? We know that there must be some kind of AI can solve driving. If 16-year-olds can learn to drive, like it can't be that hard at some level. But I would use an analogy to Danny Kahneman's System 1 and System 2, which I'm sure you know well, and you've probably talked about on this show before, right? System 1, the terms I used in my book, Kludge, where System 1 is kind of reflexive, and System 2 is more deliberative. Maybe it's not fully rational, but it tries to be rational. And the neural network approach that we have right now is like System 1, kind of does stuff by reflex. I've been in this circumstance before. How do I stick to this lane? And most of the time that works. But what it's not very good at is weird stuff that aren't in the database. So we have two possibilities here. I'll call them the easy road and the hard road. The easy road is you just keep collecting more data and you hope that you cover everything with your reflexes. But that just hasn't worked that well. If you really look hard at the data and the results, you recognize that what we have are two approaches right now. We have Waymo's approach, which works in some cities, but only a very limited number of cities. You can use it in like 3% of the world's, or no, probably less than that, 0.3% of the world's roads or something like that, right? So you can use them in, San Francisco and LA and Phoenix, but no place where there's bad weather, no place where there are rickshaws on the street, no place where there's huge numbers of pedestrians doing crazy things, and so forth. So it's still very limited, the Waymo approach. They're rolling it out more and more, but it's still kind of limited. Or you can do what Tesla's doing, where you can use it everywhere, but you need a human in the loop. And there's a cognitive illusion there too, which is people will post these videos on YouTube and say, look, I drove 45 minutes without an intervention. But they're not doing the math there. They're not really thinking, well, how many minutes do you need to go without a human intervening if you really want it to be driverless? And pause, you don't want it to work most of the time because that's a disaster, right? If you have 1 million cars on the road and they make a mistake every 1,000 miles and people tune out because it looks good, then you're screwed. A lot of people will die if you were to release that and let people out of the loop and say, you don't need to pay attention anymore. You can just, do text messaging while your car is driving. Like, it would be really bad at that level. So the Tesla approach still is really relying on people. They call it full self-driving, but you have to have your hands on the wheel. They don't even, as far as I know, have the infrastructure to test what it would be like if human beings were not paying attention. Waymo actually does have that, but they have a bunch of remote operators to intervene if things don't work and stuff like that. So trying to wrap this up, nobody actually has it working. So we don't really know. But so far, just adding more and more outlier cases has not been enough because there have always been new ones. So like you suddenly have a police officer with a hand lettered sign that's not in your training set. And if all you're doing is relying on what's in your training set, then that's not good enough. And that's really where we have collectively been as a field in AI. Somebody will solve this sometime, but it's not clear to me that just, adding more and more cases is really going to help. It's still an empirical question. We need data in a way, but we've gotten a lot of data. And, as far as the way that I read the literature as a scientist, and not just the scientific literature, but the kind of, real world practice here, is it doesn't really work. Like, we can't really trust these things to drive in kind of arbitrary conditions the way we can with the human. So I can take an Uber in Buffalo in the snow and be reasonably confident that the driver is going to get me there. And I just don't have that confidence in any driverless technology.
Yeah, I don't either. Yeah, here in Santa Barbara, we have, the major freeway, the 101 goes north, and then there's a road called 154 that goes up and over the mountains over to Solvang and Los Olivos, the wine country, and so on. It's a big, wide road, 18-wheelers go up it. Anyway, last month, they closed it early down for repaving, and so they redirected normal traffic up this tiny little road called Old San Marcos with two super tight hairpin turns. I mean, you can barely get around them in a regular car. And there's signs all over the place at the bottom. Do not take trucks up this road. And supposedly the Waze apps and all that have, trucks do not go up this road. And there were so many trucks. Pretty much every day, an 18-wheeler would get stuck in one of these hairpins, and they had to bring in these massive trucks and close traffic and so on. Finally, they just parked a cop at the bottom of the road that just pull people over. Said, you can't go up. But the app says I can. Anyway, there's a failure of it. Okay, Gary, we've spent half an hour talking about all the failures of this. What's the problem? What do we need regulations for? Why do we need to tame Silicon Valley? Come on, just let the system drive itself.
Yeah, we haven't talked about the book at all. I mean, the book has a little bit about this, but the book is really about the economics and politics behind AI. When I started studying AI, politics wasn't really part of it. It's a huge part of it right now. What has happened is basically greed has taken over. These companies are, first of all, ripping off artists and writers left, right, and center, not paying anyone. The technology itself has all kinds of problems with bias. There's a new Nature paper showing that they discriminate based on which dialect you use. So there's kind of covert racism in these systems. That's going to affect answers that they give for jobs and housing and things like that. Misinformation is a huge problem. OpenAI has admitted that, for example, Russia is using their chatbots, I believe, I think it's OpenAI, to produce misinformation. And, the free open source variations are surely being used to do that. That's a threat to democracy. In the book, I actually talk about 12 risks to AI, 12 immediate risks to AI in this one chart. And then risk from AI. And then there are also long-term risks. So, what if the machines do become smarter than us and so forth? That I'm not as immediately worried about, but either way you slice it, a lot of things can go wrong, from cybercrime to discrimination, etc. And we need, and intellectual property theft, we need a way to address this stuff. The companies, what they want is basically self-regulation. Let us take care of it. But they're not. I mean, look, for example, at deepfake porn, which has exploded over the last couple of months. And so now there are, techniques that you can make nudes non-consensually. And this is happening a lot. It's happening, I've seen stories in New Jersey and Korea, South Korea, and so forth. It's becoming pervasive. The companies are doing nothing about it. They're only sort of like putting the barest of band-aids around the misinformation. They're not really, and they're continuing mostly to steal the IP. They're making some licensing agreements, but most artists are not getting compensated and so forth. So self-regulation is not going to work. I had hoped that the U.S. government would step up to the plate and do something about this, and I'm becoming a bit disappointed. So I think the Biden administration did everything that it could. I think they did a fantastic job, but what they did is they issued an executive order. That's all they can do. They can't make law in the executive branch. If the administration changes, they can just strike down whatever they did in any case. But they can't pass laws. And so most of what they can do is like they can kind of nudge companies into reporting certain things and so forth. They cannot actually say, for example, I want to know, is this technology going to be for the benefit of society as a whole? Tell me about the costs and benefits, and we won't release it if the risks outweigh the benefits. So we can do that for drugs, for example. If a drug has some modest benefit, but it's going to have enormous risk, then we tend not to release it, or we say, go back to the drawing board, come back to us when you can mitigate the risks. We don't right now have the legal power to do that with AI, which means a company can release anything, no matter how dangerous it is. And you have a bunch of the companies going around, their leadership saying, this stuff might kill us all in a few years. Like, they literally say that, and then they race ahead and build it, and they have no plan for mitigating the risk, or at least no adequate plan for mitigating the risk. So I went to the Senate, as you mentioned earlier, and spoke to the Senate. Both parties, the representatives from both parties, really seemed to understand how important this was, to really understand that social media had been a disaster, that they had done a poor job of regulating that. Section 230 in particular basically gives immunity from liability in a large set of circumstances to the social media company. That has been terrible for teenage girls and for polarization of society. So they wanted to do better. Okay, but that was May 16th of last year. And so now it's a year and a half later, and almost no legislation has actually been brought to a vote. And it was the realization that the government wasn't going to get things done either, partly because of the enormous lobbying efforts from the companies, excuse me, that made me want to write the book and to try to appeal to the general public and say, look, the AI laws that we make right now are going to affect us for decades and maybe centuries. And just the way that we screwed up with social media, if we don't get this right now, a lot of people are going to suffer. We're going to wind up with a few tech oligarchies basically running everything, and it's not going to be good for us. So the book is really a call to arms for people to try to get involved, consider things like boycotts. And I'll just give you one more example. We have an election coming up, presidential election.
Yeah.
AI has barely been on the agenda. It's kind of crazy. Like, there's been a little talk about deepfakes with respect to political advertising, but nobody's saying, what AI policy do we need for the next 4 years in this country? Like, that's not even in the conversation. And that's insane, given how much AI might change things in the next 4 years, and certainly will change things in the next 2 decades.
Yeah. Well, it's getting pushed off the page, I guess, by abortion and immigration and Ukraine and Israel and all that, which
all
are
of those
huge.
things are important, but AI is just as important, and could be more important in the long run.
Like, you use the example here, non-consensual deepfakes. This is what you're talking about here. Deepfake porn images of Taylor Swift, for example. Wouldn't lawsuits bring these companies into alignment with proper incentives in this sense? I mean, someone like Taylor
proper
Swift
incentives would have to be new laws, right? The existing laws didn't really anticipate this situation, and there's lots of wiggle room. Like, take a different, well, on the non-consensual porn, it's just not clear what laws really cover this. And, there will maybe be some lawsuits. There haven't been that many, but it's not clear the laws cover it. I'll take a case I know a little bit better, or domain, which is defamation. One of the things required so I'll back up a second. And I don't really mind that GPT said I had a pet chicken named Henrietta, but it also makes up other stuff. So it said people were involved in sexual harassment that were not actually involved in sexual harassment. So you could ruin somebody's career, for example.
Yeah.
So you might ask the question, well, what are the rules around defamation? It's just not clear how well existing laws cover it, in part because a lot of the existing laws talk about intent. And so the AI companies can say, well, my machine didn't, mean to do this. It doesn't have an intent. It's just a autocomplete on steroids. Marcus said that, right? We're good. And so, like, it's not clear that the laws cover it. Or I'll give you another example, which is discrimination. It's pretty clear that these systems discriminate. It's pretty clear they're being used to make job decisions, but it's not clear that the way that the EEOC works allows them to get the information they need, like the system logs, to see how the stuff's actually used. So there might be laws saying in that case that certain things can be done, but they weren't really written in an AI context. And getting the data may not really be feasible. And so it might be hard to do anything about it. So we need to update our laws for this new reality. We have to have enforcement relative to that. So, for example, probably a large number of companies are using chatbots to assess people for jobs. There probably is a lot of discrimination, but we don't have the machinery in place to, as a society, to assess and evaluate and enforce and so forth. So right now, people are building the tech without much responsibility. There's not really much enforcement under the existing laws, and the existing laws were built too soon, or I don't know, maybe say that a different way. The existing laws didn't anticipate the situations that we're in now. And so, there's going to be a lot of pain coming out of the current system unless we do something about it.
But like, who would someone like a Taylor Swift even sue if it's just some individual that's anonymous and posts on X a deep fake porn of her? X would say, well, we can't control what people post. We get it off there as fast as we can, but that's just the way it goes. And you can't even find the person that made it.
That's right. You're never going to find the person that made it. They're going to post it anonymously. It's not just Taylor Swift, right? I mean, like, people are doing this in high schools. The boys are doing it to the girls. There are these new like Nudify apps where you make a fake picture of your classmate not wearing any clothes, and then the kids, like, they'll send around and snicker over it. Like, the boys who are doing it have no assets to go after. The law doesn't clearly enough specify that this can't be done. Like, obviously it should. And there are some, in that case, some laws that are being put forward, but the existing state is not much actually covers any of this. And so this is a good example where we need stuff. And then right now, the social media have this complete freedom because of Section 230. And we need to reassess that and say, like, maybe you should have responsibility. Or what, maybe you can't be perfect, but what should be the best reasonable practices here to prevent this from being done? And let's hold the companies to do that. The EU is starting to think that through. We really don't have any infrastructure around that here. And we have, history of people saying First Amendment, so you should be able to do what you want. But you might wonder, like, if somebody violates some norm a billion times a day as opposed to once, does something at scale, do we care about that? And what should we do about it?
Yeah. Well, your first one, deliberate, automated, mass-produced political disinformation, seems like we've been having that for about a decade now, or at least since 2016.
I think the mass production is what's changed.
Yeah.
I mean, at some extent, we already did, right? I mean, it used to be that, like, the Russian government had a whole operation to do this run by people. But it cost them, there's actual numbers on this, like $1 million, I think it was a month, during the 2016 election. And now what Russia did for $1 million a month, I think that's the number, anybody can do for like a couple $100 a month. And so the economics change things, right? When you make it so that anybody can do something, it's sort of like the difference between a knife and a submachine gun, right? Like, they're both weapons for killing people, but it does change things when you can automate it and do it less, expensively and with less training and so forth. And it is making a difference. These things are getting used in the real world.
Okay, accelerating crime, number 6. What is that?
I mean, there's all kinds of crimes. I mean, that's a kind of umbrella category. But I'll give you one example. Is there's something that's also been around for a while, which is called phishing, where you send somebody an email and try to get them to type in their password. You trick them. You're like, your account needs to be updated or whatever. So now, not only can you have a system like GPT or Llama, which is open source, write those things, but you can do it in a more customized way. You can do it at a greater scale. So it's the same point I made about misinformation. Phishing attacks, from what I gather, although I don't have firm data on this, seem to be way up because people are using the tools to do that. There's also the pig butchering scams. You might be familiar with these, where you find your mark, you try to make them fall in love with you or think you got a business proposition or whatever, and you maybe give them a little money and then you try to get all of their money out of them. So now you've got new tools to do more of that. An interesting general meta point here is that I've talked about the limits of large language models, and yet I'm saying, hey, they're kind of dangerous in these ways. Well, that's partly because there's an asymmetry here, which is the people who are running scams and stuff like that don't need the things to work as well as, say, if you were using them for nuclear grid or writing the news. But if you're writing the news, you want to be correct. If you're running the nuclear grid, you want to be correct. If you're doing a phishing scam, volume is all that matters. You don't care if it makes a bunch of mistakes. You're trying to get the dumbest people that you can find to give you a bunch of money. And if you can hit more dumb people who don't notice the mistakes or whatever, then you make more money, you've scammed more people. And or if you're making misinformation, you don't care that it's not true almost by definition. So the fact that these systems are blind to the truth doesn't matter to you. You send out as much as you can. Famously Bannon said you flood the zone with shit.
Yeah.
Now you have a tool to flood the zone with shit. It's easier to use these tools in these kind of corrupt ways than it is to use them in more pro-social kinds of ways.
You ever heard that thing about the Nigerian spam scam where they intentionally put all caps and typos to weed out people who would catch that right away, and anybody who would fall for it with all those obvious cues must be a good mark.
Yeah, no, I have heard that. I believe that to be true, but I guess I've never actually seen data on it. But
yeah,
the implicit data is a lot of the spam that I receive is like that, and so I presume that the spammers have done the data analysis.
Yes,
they're basically doing the spammers. A lot of them are smart. They may not be ethical, but they're smart. They've done the A/B comparisons just like websites have, and they figured that this works.
Mm-hmm. On deepfakes and things like that, is there a way to put a digital watermark in there at some point where an AI could detect it?
I mean, yes and no. So there's some things it can do. There's a really good collaboration between Adobe and Microsoft and some others to try to do this, but there are ways to evade them is one issue. Another issue is that like until every camera has them, like you're gonna have a lot of legitimate stuff that doesn't, and so like your measure of does it have a watermark or not is not going to be that great for a while. If you could magically replace everybody's cell phone, then you could have 100% compliance, at least on newly generated content. You'd still have a lot of old stuff where you don't have it. Related thing is like these detectors for plagiarized papers or GPT written papers. They sort of work and they sort of don't. They're like, if you have a detector that's like 85% correct, and you run it on 500 students and you make a whole bunch of mistakes on honest kids, that's terrible, right?
Yeah.
I mean, even once, if you're an honest kid to be accused of plagiarism is a very serious thing. And so you can't really use it if it's 85% correct. Like, what is the value in that? And so these kinds of things need to be very, very solid to really have utility. And it's hard to get them to be that solid. So I'm not opposed to them. I think it is important work and important research to figure out how to do it. It's easier in a video because you have more place to hide information than it is in a text. And I think it's, valuable research. I think people should try to do these things, but they're not magic wands either.
Yeah. All right. Surveillance, capitalism, privacy, and data leaks. I mean, capitalism in general, you have an incentive problem. Mark Zuckerberg's job is to make as much money as possible for his shareholders.
Well, I mean, this is, why we have certain rules on public utilities, for example, right?
Yeah.
So, we don't always let capitalism, go unfettered. We do have rules in every other domain, essentially, except software, where we have hardly any. And we might want to think of these companies a little bit as public utilities. We might want to think about what incentives we use to have them operate. Like if they create jobs as opposed to destroy jobs, we could give them tax credits. So, we don't have to say we're just not going to intervene at all. We're just going to let it run. We don't do that for public utilities, and maybe we shouldn't be doing that for AI.
Yeah. And do you agree with people like Jonathan Haidt who are concerned about the mental health of teenagers from using social media and that, well, he's kind of taking a bottom-up approach. Let's get all parents and schools to ban phones in schools as a start.
I would say that the data are not 100% in, but they're strongly suggestive. And, Jonathan's probably right. Smartphones are addictive and so forth. And then you can kind of multiply that by AI. So one of the scariest things that happened after the book went to press is that OpenAI bought a webcam company. And they also appointed Paul Nakasone, who used to be from the NSA, to their board. And if I read those tea leaves correctly, OpenAI's, there's one other tea leaf, which is they want all your documents. Right? They want your Word documents, your calendar, your email, and so forth. That's positioning OpenAI to be truly, big brother, to be truly a frightening surveillance company. And they're not making that much money. They're making a few $1 billion, but they're spending many billions of dollars. I think they might be forced into becoming a surveillance company. And they've got webcams and your documents and so forth. Like, then they know everything about you and they can sell it to whoever they want for whatever purpose. I think that's truly frightening.
And American companies would say, well, if we don't do it, the Chinese are doing it anyway, so we need to do it to keep up.
I mean, look, the Chinese are requiring that their chatbots commit to the party line of those in power. We're not going to do that just because the Chinese do it. I mean,
No, oh, right, I see. Yeah, okay.
I mean,
but the general development of the technology
I
just
mean,
isn't.
that horse, at least for this technology, has entirely left the barn, right? So Zuckerberg decided to release a model that is very similar to GPT-4, and I should say not just release, but give away for free. And so, whatever advantage we had over China in terms of large language models is basically gone right now.
Yeah,
They can use essentially state of the art technology. So unless there's a new innovation that we could try to protect the intellectual property, that's just done. Like they are basically caught up because Zuckerberg gave it to them. I heard this insane thing where Jan LeCun, who has a bit of an ego issue, said, "I'm only recognized on the streets in two places. One of them is Paris, and because he's from Paris and whatever, and the other is Shanghai." And I'm like, dude, you're a hero in Shanghai because you have given away this technology and advanced China tremendously. But is that really like, the right move
you want to be
there?
recognized for that?
You
Yeah.
want to be recognized? My jaw hit the floor when I heard that.
Well, I mean, on the privacy thing, also these like Ring cameras, they're everywhere now, and they're pretty high resolution. And aren't there some laws where the police are trying to get footage from Ring cameras to solve crimes, and there's some privacy issues of people that don't want to give over their footage?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not fully up on all the legal cases there and so forth, but I mean, certainly Ring cameras are like all of these dual use technologies. There's some cases where they might be helpful, and there are going to be a lot where they're going to be exploitive. People of your generation and my generation value privacy, and there are a lot of younger people just don't really care
Yeah.
as much. And I think that's going to be a mistake, and that it will catch up to people.
And then wasn't it Scarlett Johansson sued? Was it Disney for using her voice as in an AI?
Uh
There was
That I don't know about. What I do know is that
one of those actors.
OpenAI asked Scarlett Johansson, "Can we use your voice?"
Oh, that was
Because
it. Yes.
Sam Altman, the CEO of OpenAI, is a huge fan of the film Her,
Mm.
and they have this new product which I actually just got to play with, called ChatGPT Advanced Voice or something like that. It doesn't roll off the tongue, but basically what it is ChatGPT with speech recognition and speech synthesis, and that are quite good. So it's still, I would say, intellectually limited in the ways that ChatGPT are, and in fact, in some extra ways, like you can't upload files to it yet or whatever. But fundamentally, it's ChatGPT, but you can talk to it in real time. The speech synthesis or speech recognition is very good. I played around with it on a Twitter space for about 20 minutes, and most of the time it understood what I was saying. I mean, it figured out what the words. It got confused by a lot of things, but that's more on the large language model chatbot side than the speech recognition. And the speech synthesis is very good. It sounds like you're talking to a person. In fact, it can like add in sound effects and so forth. So their idea was this is going to be like Her. Now, the truth is that Samantha in the movie could like read your emails and actually understand them and decide which ones are important or not. And like ChatGPT can't really do that, and I certainly would not trust it to do it. But they wanted to kind of pitch it as being like Her, and so Sam approached Scarlett Johansson, and she said no. She said, "I don't want to do it." Like I think she thought about it for a little while and whatever. She thought about how it would influence people's perception of her and her career, or I don't know. She didn't specify her reasoning, but she said no. And then what OpenAI did is they did auditions for voice actors, and they basically chose the one who was closest to her voice. So it was kind of the same sexy, breathy voice,
Yeah.
not identical. If you listen to them A to B back to back, you can tell it's not actually Scarlett Johansson. But if you don't listen to them back to back, you just think it is Scarlett Johansson. And she was pretty upset about it, and she felt like, I said no. And there's a bunch of law about likeness and legal precedents that suggest that she might be in trouble. I think the famous case was Bette Midler versus Ford. Ford did a kind of similar thing back in the day of doing a commercial where Bette Midler didn't agree. They got a voice actor who sounded like Bette Midler, and they said, "Well, it's not Bette Midler," and the judge said that doesn't matter. You're incurring. I don't know if the word is intellectual property, but you're cutting in on her turf, and you can't do that. So Ford lost, and I don't know what's going to happen here. I don't know what suits have been filed. I haven't read any, but I think if Johansson want to go the same direction, the Bette Midler case gives her a pretty strong precedent. In any case, whatever the legal is, it's very clear that it was disrespectful, right? She said, "Don't use my voice," and they took something that was very close. And it's interesting. Sam Altman was on the top of the world, like almost literally, when we were at the Senate a year and a half ago. I mean, like kings and prime ministers were taking meetings with him and so forth. And his um, place in the world has declined some since. He's still prominent, but I think a lot of people have grown not to trust him. I wrote an article in The Guardian a few weeks ago about this, kind of detailing why public opinion is to some extent soured on him. And the Scarlett Johansson thing was a big part of it. I mean, I think especially women know, no means no, right? This is a phrase that will resonate with any women and hopefully with most of the men in the audience. You know, she said no, and he proceeded anyway. And that really, I think, was a huge mistake on Altman's part.
Yeah. Wasn't Elon griping about that also? OpenAI is supposed to be a nonprofit
Well, it's a separate
corporation.
issue, and I mean, Elon's right there. I disagree with Elon about a lot of stuff, and I post on X about that. But he is right. In fact, I've been posting about it for a long time too. Um, OpenAI is actually, most people don't know this, is actually legally still a nonprofit. It was founded as a nonprofit,
Hmm.
remains a nonprofit. There's a commercial entity that was added afterwards, many years after it was founded, that is a for-profit. And there is now, I think, a huge question about whether it is still serving in the interest of the nonprofit that it was founded. The nonprofit was supposed to do things for the benefit of humanity, and it was not supposed to work for any one customer. And now they kind of work for Microsoft, and so forth. So they've really strayed from the mission. And a group called Public Citizens, in fact, filed a complaint to the Attorney General in California saying that this isn't right, and they should be forced to dissolve the nonprofit, give up some of that equity to an actual charity. But right now, as far as I know, as of the last filing was not that long ago, they continue to be a nonprofit with this for-profit stuff underneath. It's I think it's scandalous, and Elon has said the same. There's also the matter of the name, right? They're called OpenAI, but they're the least open probably of the AI companies. So nobody knows what's in GPT-4, for example. We don't know the data. We don't know the algorithm. We know a bunch of stuff that's there, but there's a bunch of secret stuff. So that they started by alleging they wanted to be open. It turns out they always knew they weren't going to be. This came out in a lawsuit that Elon Musk filed and retracted. And so the whole thing seems very Orwellian to me, very doublespeak.
Yeah. Well, again, a lot of this would be settled by strikes and lawsuits and things like that. I think the Hollywood writers were that was part of their strike last year, was not using ChatGPT and to write scripts. So, I mean, I just thought of a scenario. Let's say Paramount, which owns the Godfather series, decides they want to do a part 4, and instead of paying screenwriters, I don't know what they pay, a couple $1 million to write a new script, they just have ChatGPT write it, and there's plenty to work on that's out there it could use. I would think that would generate lawsuits, and somehow we'd end up with these kind of nuanced legal issues about what
Well, I
constitutes
mean, it did.
copying.
That is exactly what precipitated the strike. There may have been multiple issues, but that was one of the issues that precipitated the strike. I don't think it was Paramount, but there were other companies. I've heard some secondhand, kind of off the record, that very much wanted to do that, especially in domains where sequels seem like a kind of obvious thing. I'll just leave it at that and
Yeah.
leave it to the reader. But there are places with franchises that were considering this, and they knew, I think, that ChatGPT wasn't going to be good enough. But I think their theory was, we're going to, instead of paying the $2 million or whatever the number is for a human written script, we'll have ChatGPT do it, and then we'll just pay someone like $20,000 to fix it up. And that was really what motivated the strike. And the strike was pretty successful. So for now, the Hollywood studios are not allowed to do that. That could change, but that was one of the concessions that came from the strike.
Yeah. Remember back in the day when there was fan fiction for Star Trek?
Yeah.
I guess it didn't matter because no one was making any money off of it. I guess
That's right. Fan fiction is actually illegal. I mean, it's a violation of the copyright laws. So the fair use stuff does depend on whether it's commercial application or not. But they don't go after it because it doesn't really cost them any money. It's kind of goodwill from the communities. They don't. But it is actually technically illegal.
Yeah.
There's going to be issues here because these systems can be used commercially. You can argue that, for example, when a company like Midjourney makes copyrighted characters at mass scale and charges you a monthly fee, that's pretty different from fan fiction. And so there are, in fact, a whole bunch of lawsuits around that.
Okay, your last two concerns here. Over-reliance on unreliable systems. What do you mean?
So, I mean, I guess the poster child for that is Congressman Ted Lieu and some others tried to pass a very reasonable law, I guess it was last year, which said you may not use AI, generative AI or otherwise, without humans in the loop to launch nuclear weapons. And you would have thought that that would be a no-brainer.
Yeah.
And it didn't pass. You know, I think there was politics behind what didn't pass. But that's an example of potential over-reliance. Like Donald Trump comes in office, his buddy Elon says Grok is great. I mean, this is just a hypothetical, but imagine, you know, Trump comes in office, asks Elon, Elon says you should use Grok. Starlink is great and you should use Grok too, and we're going to hook it up to the nukes. There's no law to prevent that. None at all.
Unbelievable. Wow.
And that would be, if it happened, you know, huge over-reliance on an unreliable system. Like, you know, some of the time, if you posed hypotheticals, it might give you a reasonable answer. And sometimes it would be as batshit crazy as the thing with the farmer and the woman in the boat, right? Like, and I mean, nuclear weapons is all outlier cases. Like all of the known cases where there was almost a nuclear war was something really weird happened. Yeah. And someone had the presence of mind to say, well, you know, it's because of this or that. I don't think the Russians are really attacking. You know, it looks that way, but let's hold our horses.
Yeah, the most famous case there was Stanislav Petrov, who saw the 5 blips on the radar screen. Yeah, would an AI reason, well, if the United States was launching a first strike to take out all our missiles, would they launch only 5? No.
Yeah, I mean, you want Petrov there. You don't want an AI doing it. Yeah. You just don't. And yet right now, you legally can do it. So that's over-reliance on unreliable systems.
Yeah. All right, last one, environmental costs.
I mean, those are huge. We don't know exactly what they'll be in the final analysis. I would say that the best thing that's happened in AI in the last year is it's gotten somewhat more energy efficient. But on the other hand, people are pressed to build bigger and bigger models, maybe 100 or 1,000 times bigger. And so if you can kind of cut the environmental costs for a model of one size in half, but then you make it 1,000 times bigger, then the environmental cost still goes way up. And we're talking about electricity and water. It may raise prices for electricity. You know, we're talking emissions. It's pretty considerable. It's hard to know exactly because the technology is evolving. So I can't give you a precise number on how bad the cost is, but you know, it could turn out, for example, that all the AI in the world takes as much energy as, you know, a medium-sized country or something like that. You know, that's not out of the question, given the addiction to making bigger models that require more power to run.
One of my guests was telling me about some server farm in Texas, but they have so many servers, it's so hot, and they have to generate all this cooling, and they have all these motors, and there's like this large hum throughout the entire town. No. And so they've had to like regulate that just for the citizens' peace of mind.
I mean, there's a lot of that going on where communities are starting to, you know, weigh the costs and benefits of having these big servers.
Yeah. Okay, putting it all together, you end the book here saying, just kind of going through some quick bullet points here of what you would like to see. You don't want to stop AI, but we should insist on it being made safe, better, more trustworthy. No training on copyright.
Can we actually just pause on that first point for 1 second?
Yeah.
I have a lot of enemies who don't like me saying the things that I do.
Why is that? You seem like the good guy on Twitter on all this stuff. The fair and balanced, it seems to me.
I mean, I try to be fair and balanced, but I don't like the association with Fox News. But anyway, what a lot of people do is they try to paint me as against AI in all forms.
Oh, I never got that from you.
I mean, you've studied reasoning errors a lot, so you'd be familiar with this kind of straw manning, but it's a very common way of straw manning to say, well, Gary is an AI hater. And the reality is, I'm just trying to make it better for everybody. And that means having a better legal framework and also having a better underlying technology. Like, I do think that AI could help us with science and medicine. There's a paper out right now about an AI scientist. Like, using an LLM, a large language model, for an AI scientist is a terrible idea. But some future technology might be great. Like, I'm completely open to having AI be a ubiquitous part of our lives. We have to think through the employment issues, and we have to think through the regulatory issues and so forth. And I'm actually pro AI. There's this crazy group called the EACCs, the effective accelerationists, who want AI to get here as fast as possible. And they all hate me. And I think they're all, well, do I want to say all? Nearly all of them are idiots because they don't recognize that in a certain way, I'm actually on their side. I'm actually trying to get us out of a local minimum where we're stuck building the wrong technology with a legal infrastructure that is going to bite all of us badly when, like, there's going to be some horrible car accident with a self-driving car or some horrible cybercrime. I'm trying to say the best way to get to a good AI future is actually to have reasonable regulation on it. I mean, think about like airlines. Like, we don't just put out any airline and we get mad when Boeing cuts corners, right? And it's been to the benefit of the airline industry to actually have regulation. But anyway, these EAC people demonize me all the time. And their main way to do that is to simply pretend, or maybe they don't know any better, that I'm opposed to AI when I'm actually trying to make it better. It's a really weird, like, cult-like phenomenon.
I can see that. I don't know those guys in particular, but I've followed the transhumanists and the singularitarians and all these kind of far future, and we're all going to get to live forever, and there's going to be infinite wealth for everybody. You know, very utopian in their vision. So people like you are the ones that are keeping us. I got to get there before I die, so I get to live forever.
Yeah, I mean, it's probably not going to work fast enough for you and me, unfortunately.
No, I don't think so. I mean,
look, I sympathize with the impulse of wanting to, get to utopia, but we're actually headed more towards dystopia, where, a few companies have everybody's information, monetize it, don't give any. Like, these companies, they tell you they're believing universal basic income, and they don't give artists a nickel for their work. Like, I mean, if they're not going to give artists a nickel now when they've stolen, works from millions of artists and writers, like, why believe that they're actually going to give you universal basic income later? Like, have these companies, they're going to keep us, the rest of us, at subsistence level or something, like, like, I don't know. It's just naive to think that you get to utopia for free. I mean, the point of the book is, if you want to get to the best possible outcome, you have to get involved, and we have to have checks and balances. You can't, put all the power in the hands of these companies, either directly or because they have these massive lobbying enterprises and so forth. You have to have balances on it. You just have to. And we know that everywhere else. We know that in the, foundation of United States legal system and so forth. You get to AI and people's brains go out the window and they think it's different, like that it's all going to work by magic. It's not.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I know that libertarians are a little bit like that. I should be free to do whatever I want, and you should too, and anybody can do anything. Oh yeah, so I can drive on either side of the road that I want? Well, not that one. we need some regular. And then if you go down the road, it's like, okay.
Yeah, or I mean, Elon doesn't want foreign interference in the U.S., but he wants to tell the Brazilian Supreme Court how it should.
Oh yes, right. I saw that.
There's a lot of
yeah, that's too much
contradiction.
All right, Gary, I know you were tight on your time here today, and you're doing a lot of interviews for this. So thank you so much. Taming Silicon Valley. What's your next step? Are you going on the road? You returning to Congress? And
I mean, we'll see where things go. But in the short term, I just want to get the word out about this, and I will soon have a website, tamingsiliconvalley.org, I believe it is. And I want to use that as a way to kind of cultivate interest and get the general public involved.
It's a moving target. I mean, it's like every week there's something in the news about all this stuff. It's
every day, every hour. I haven't slept since ChatGPT came out. Not quite right. Literally, but there's a lot to consider here, and I hope the public will learn to care about it as much as we care about, say, immigration policy, because it might have an even bigger effect on our future.
That's right. I forgot to ask you about the UBI thing. Are you worried about AI like taking lawyers' jobs, for example, or? not just truck drivers, but
I mean,
intellectual.
worried. I think it would be okay if we had fewer lawyers, but yeah,
Okay,
don't quote me on
that
that.
was a bad example. Yeah. Okay.
Look, AI will eventually take most jobs. In the short term, it won't take that many, but it is taking, for example, the jobs of a lot of commercial artists and so
Yeah.
forth.
Yeah. Yeah.
I
Okay.
think if we
Okay.
learned one thing, it's that we're not actually that good at predicting which jobs are going to go first.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
The other thing we've learned is it's easy to say that some job will disappear and then be wrong. So, um, for example, Jeff Hinton famously said, he's the pioneer of deep learning. He said, in 2016, we may as well stop training radiologists because in a few years we won't need them anymore. And here we are 8 years later, we don't have enough radiologists. The AI still doesn't really work reliably enough. Same with driverless cars. Like a lot of people projected we wouldn't need
Yeah.
taxi drivers anymore, and we still do. So we're not always so good at making those projections.
Yeah. All right, Gary. Thanks. That's a good place to stop. Good luck.
Thanks a lot for having me.